on September the 19th. During the course of the day, the two armies have come together along a general battle line that is reflected by this map. The blue blocks representing the Union troops and the Confederates represented by the red blocks. The action had begun up by Jay's Mill about 7:30 in the morning. Depending upon, the action that's reflected here begins about 7:30, although there was some action earlier that morning, but it then flows south during the course of the day. And that's the general trend. And as that occurred on the 19th, it really did nothing at all towards Bragg's hope of getting his army in between the Union Army and Chattanooga and attacking the Union Army and driving them southwestward to crush them against the wall of Lookout Mountain. As the fighting had developed on the 19th and flowed southward, Bragg had brought more troops onto the battlefield and had fed them in essentially progressively by division ever further south. But in early afternoon, another division, a little more than 5,100 men under Patrick Cleburne, comes onto the battlefield, crossing West Chickamauga Creek at Thedford's Ford, and then marching northward. And they were sent up towards the very far right of the Confederate line, and they're going to wind up becoming engaged up here. And that's primarily what we're going to look at this evening, is their engagement, and in particular the right part of that engagement. What we're going to do is leave here momentarily. We're going to walk down Brotherton Road about 3/4 of a mile and get down towards where Cleburne starts, and then we'll start working our way back here. We will progress up 2 trails off of the pavement through the woods as part of that, but then we'll come back to Winfrey Field and the pavement here. Along the way, please be cognizant of your footing, particularly on the trails. The surfaces vary. There are rocks and logs and sticks and the like, so watch your footing, particularly as we enter the woods, and with the overcast, it likely to get dark a little bit earlier than it would if we had a clear sky. If you have a flashlight with you, that we might be necessary by the time we get back out into the open ground at Winfrey Field. So we'll set off. One of our fine National Military Park volunteers, Robert Carter, is with us tonight. He'll be bringing up the rear of the column to Confederate division engaged in this action, and that part of it, on the left flank, there's some troops from another division engaged, but here on the right of this Confederate attack, it is all troops of Patrick Cleburne's division, of Daniel Harvey Hill's corps, of Bragg's army. And as I said, the division's just over 5,100 men strong. Cleburne says that he has 4,800 muskets in his ranks. It consists of 3 brigades, and they had marched up from the south, where they had been on September the 18th, part of Braxton Bragg's force that was confronting Federals across West Chickamauga Creek at Lee and Gordon's Mill and upstream to fix them in place. But now that a different battle is unfolding, new orders are sent to Cleburne, and Cleburne will start marching his troops northward. Lucius Polk, a nephew to Confederate Corps Commander Leonidas Polk, commands Cleburne's lead brigade. It is a brigade that consists of one Arkansas regiment, the 1st, 3 Tennessee regiments, the 2nd, 35th, and 48th, and 2 regiments of the Confederate attempt to create a regular army. Just like the United States had a regular army, the Confederate States attempt to create a regular army, and the 3rd and 5th Confederate Infantry are part of this brigade. Now, both of those units are very small. One of them is heavily Arkansas, the other is heavily Tennessee, mostly from the Memphis area. Both of them have a significant number of Irish immigrants, mostly laborers from the Mississippi River, in their ranks, and both of the regiments are much reduced in size. And as has been the case in Bragg's army and in a number of different brigades, these 2 regiments have been consolidated, have been put together to function as a single regiment. And the colonel of the 5th Confederate, Colonel James Argyle Smith, is the colonel of the consolidated 3rd and 5th Confederate. As Lucius Polk writes in his report, about 1 p.m. I received orders to move in the direction of the right of the army. The necessary orders were immediately given, and my brigade commenced moving down Chickamauga Creek. John Colquitt, the colonel of the 1st Arkansas, said it was about 11 o'clock when they received the order and began to move, and Colonel Robinson of the 2nd Tennessee agreed as well, and Colonel Benjamin Jefferson Hill of the 3rd and 35th Tennessee said it was about 11 or 12 o'clock. But they will move south and ford West Chickamauga Creek at Thedford's Ford. So fellas, do you all know what a ford is?
A ford is like a shallow and usually narrow place in the river that's easy to cross without a bridge.
Very good. In hiking, particularly long distance, might you have to ford some small creeks or water courses? Yeah. Now you say shallow, and that is important because I'm not necessarily saying anything here, but can you cross as deep a water as this fella here?
Probably wade through the Mississippi or something.
He's calling you short.
One of the things when you read the Civil War accounts and troops talk about fording, when some soldier complains that the general made him ford a creek or a river and the water came up to his neck, one of the questions you might ask yourself is, how tall is that soldier? Because another soldier might say the water only came up to his chest. The depth of water does matter, and these men are going to ford West Chickamauga Creek. Now, okay, they have to wade through the water to get across the creek. What does that mean?
They have to basically like walk through it.
Okay, they have to walk through it. Yep, but what's going to happen when they walk through it?
Their gear's gonna get wet.
I'm sorry.
Their gear's gonna get wet.
Their gear might get wet. Yes. And ideally, if you have to ford, you want to have the opportunity to do what?
Keep your stuff dry.
Yeah, keep your stuff dry. And how are you going to keep your stuff dry?
Hold it above your head.
Put it up over your head. Yeah. What are some other things you might want to keep dry?
Gunpowder.
Okay. Yeah. Well, just think about yourself. If you had to ford a body of water, you might hold your pack up above your head, but what else might you want to hold up above your head? Your shoes, your socks, your clothing. You might have to ford the creek largely what?
Naked.
Yeah. Well, there's a battle going on. Do you think anybody's going to allow these guys to undress to ford? No. They have to ford the creek dressed. As Colonel George H. Nixon will say that because of this and it getting cold on the night of September the 19th, the soldiers suffered considerable from the cold, their clothes being wet from wading the Chickamauga in the evening. And a man of the 2nd Tennessee writing says, the air was quite chill, and Cleburne's men who had waded the Chickamauga, this is when they first deploy after getting on across the creek, built little brush fires in spite of orders to the contrary, supposing that no further movement was intended. Why do they build little brush fires?
So they can stay warm.
So they can stay warm and try to dry out. Exactly. But think about that. The night before had been cold enough to frost, and now night is approaching again. And what is likely to be the condition again? Frost. And so these men now have forded. Where they crossed the creek, a ford called Thedford's Ford. The water was between knee and waist deep, based on the accounts that we have. Once across the creek, they march up to the north, and they march into this area. Now, if we went a couple hundred yards further to the east down this road, we would come to the intersection of this road with the Jays Mill Road. And they are actually going to come marching up the Jays Mill Road. And when Lucius Polk's brigade, led by the 35th Tennessee, and Colonel Benjamin Jefferson Hill, with his little wire-rimmed spectacle glasses, leads them up, when his regiment reaches the intersection of this road, the Brotherton Road, and Jays Mill Road, right at the area of Jay's Steam Sawmill, or as some of Lucius Polk's men call it, Underwood's Steam Sawmill, they halt and they begin forming their line of battle. The 35th Tennessee on the right, then the 48th Tennessee, then the 2nd Tennessee, then the 1st Arkansas, then the 3rd and 5th Confederate. And the two other brigades of Cleburne's division, Sterling Alexander Martin Wood's Alabama and Mississippi Brigade, march up, and they're going to form on Lucius Polk's left. And then the Texas and Arkansas Brigade under James B. Deschler, they are going to march up and form on the left of Wood. And Cleburne's front, these three brigades, these 5,000 men, Cleburne's front is going to be nearly a mile in length from north to south. As the one 2nd Tennessee soldier said, they didn't think they were going to be fighting. It's late in the day. What battle action they do here is further to the south. And the men build some little brush fires. But it's getting late in the day, and it's starting to get dark, particularly in the woods where the trees have trapped and held in some of the smoke of the battle during the day, and little brush fires that have gotten started. The light of these fires is seen by some of the Federals, and this will cause some Federal artillery to open fire. As the 2nd Tennessee man, one shot of which struck the 5th wheel, or the extra wheel on a caisson, an ammunition carrying vehicle for the artillery in the immediate vicinity of General Cleburne. the men believing that the light of the little fires attracted the Federal artillery fire. But they will form their line of battle, and much to their surprise, they are going to get orders to advance. About 5:30, Lucius Polk says. About 6 o'clock, Colonel Nixon says. But just as it starts to get dark, perceptibly darker because of the smoke, they're going to get orders to advance. Now, one of the things when you look at the battle from the larger perspective, you can legitimately answer is it's now late in the afternoon, darkness is just a short distance away. Giving Cleburne the order to advance, is this a worthwhile expenditure of his combat power? And then the other thing is, what's Bragg trying to do? Turn the Union left flank. Where is the Union left flank? Well, they don't really know. But should they be trying to find that out? And as it turns out, Cleburne is not striking the actual flank of the Union line. He's striking a front. And so we can wonder about the value of this effort that the Confederates make, and whether or not Cleburne's division would have been better off being saved, unbloodied, for use on the following day versus this fight that we're looking at this evening. Of course, we have the benefit of hindsight to be able to raise these questions, but this also further illustrates this lack of knowledge the Confederates have about exactly where the position is, the Union position is, and then, of course, the conduct of some Confederate officers who would have been responsible for determining for Bragg where the Union left flank was. Nathan Bedford Forrest. And Forrest has been fighting his cavalry all day long, but simply fighting the enemy, not doing his job as the eyes and ears, the intelligence gathering force of the Army. And so as a result, Cleburne is going to be sent forward, but without the necessary orders to actually get them to strike the Union line in the right place. Lucius Polk says, about 5:30, I received orders from General Cleburne to move my brigade forward, to pass over Liddell's division. They are behind at that moment other Union troops. And just ahead of us, in some low ground that is represented by the little culvert that we crossed, is lying Liddell's division. They had fought early that morning and then in the afternoon in the Winfrey Field, and the Cleburne is to pass over them and then engage and drive the enemy before us. My brigade immediately moved forward, and having passed Liddell's division some 200 yards, encountered the enemy. In the first Arkansas, John Colquitt even identifies the regiment specifically of Liddell's division that his men pass over. The 6th and 7th Arkansas regiments consolidated, but Cleburne's men are now moving forward. On Polk's left, Sam Wood's Alabamans and Mississippians are moving forward, and Deschler's men are moving forward on Wood's left. But with every step, it's starting to get a little bit darker as they move through the woods. And this is ground that has been fought over earlier in the day. So what lies all through the forest? Dead bodies, yep. And not just dead bodies. There are some severely wounded soldiers of both sides who either there had been no opportunity to remove them to a field hospital, or the litter bearers, the stretcher bearers, did not think that there was any value in taking that soldier back to a hospital, that they were so badly injured that they could not be saved. Of course, some of those men are crying for assistance, moaning and shrieking from the pain that they are in. And now Cleburne's men are moving forward, stepping over the men of Liddell's division, who have been in action earlier and probably show the signs of that. And now there's the apprehension for Cleburne's men as well, of what they're likely to encounter in front of them. Now, this road does not run perfectly east and west. It runs a little bit north of east, runs essentially to the east, northeast, and so as we've walked it, we've actually kind of angled across part of the front of Cleburne's division. And now as we turn around to follow Cleburne's division back, we have to do kind of the same thing. What we're going to do is we're going to walk a short distance up this trail to another trail that will take us westward to emulate the move of Polk's brigade of Cleburne's division more exactly. Any questions or observations at this point?
Was Bragg's headquarters still there?
This is Bragg's headquarters on September the 20th.
Okay.
The final day of the battle. Right. On this, the 19th of September, his headquarters is down at Thedford's Ford on West Chickamauga Creek. Even in looking at Bragg's headquarters on the 18th, 19th, and 20th, it is worth looking at that relative to where they are and the ability then to exchange information with Bragg and get orders and direction from Bragg. In the end, there is a lot of evidence that Bragg's headquarters is never located in a place to really facilitate the receipt and distribution of information in a timely fashion. Even on the 20th, when his headquarters is here, would this be easy to find? A little campfire in the woods. It's not at a major intersection, not at any sort of major landmark, and he will by afternoon be largely out of touch with what is happening on the battlefield. He will not even know about the breakthrough as late as 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So it is always valuable to consider Bragg's location and how connected he was to the course of the battle. On the Union side, Rosecrans on the 19th moves his headquarters up to the Widow Glens, and that is one of the two routes by which almost all the Union troops who are going to enter the battle are going to pass by there. And people are sending him information, and he's able to then distribute information to these new troops arriving on the battlefield.
So now, did this road follow some road or path from back then, or
no? This is a historic road.
It is. Okay.
It was just a dirt track through the woods. It was known as the Brotherton Road, because at the end of this road, where it reaches the Lafayette Road, the Brothertons have established a farm.
Okay.
On the battlefield, you've probably seen, we have several roads that have hyphenated names. Glen Vineyard Road, Glen Kelly Road, Alexander Vineyard Road. And those are typically roads that lead from the Vineyard Farm to the Alexander Farm, or the Glen Farm to the Vineyard Farm.
Okay.
So,
Interesting.
And now none of these roads had names at the time. They become known as that as this historic event unfolds, and people then want to start to differentiate one from the other. And so they use these descriptors about where they came from and where they went to, in most cases. Alrighty, so we're going to go up the trail here. Again, watch your footing as we do. We're now going to turn westward and emulate the movement of Lucius Polk's brigade, and really kind of the center of the brigade, the 2nd Tennessee in the advance, and the 1st Arkansas. Colonel Colquitt of the 1st Arkansas writes, "Our division formed in line and moved forward about dark. Passing over Liddell's division, our skirmishers, who were a short distance in advance, soon began a rapid fire, and in a few moments we found the enemy immediately confronting us. We poured into his ranks a spirited fire before which he quailed and soon began to retire." So we're going to now advance westward, and soon our skirmishers will make contact with the enemy, and then the main line will become engaged. So, of course, it's not quite dark yet, but at the time, with the smoke in the woods, the perception of darkness was greater. So let's go forward on the advance. For Polk's brigade in the assault, there's if we had gone out to the intersection of Jays Mill Road and Brotherton Road, we would have found another tablet for Polk's brigade at their starting position. But here they are in their assault on the line. They only as they go forward will they really begin to get some sense of where the enemy line is in front of them. Colonel George Nixon, the commander of the 48th Tennessee, a Middle Tennessee regiment, partly from Murray County, but mostly from Lawrence and Wayne County in southwestern Middle Tennessee, and a regiment that has had organizational problems. There are actually 2 48th Tennessees in the Confederate Army at this time. One of them is down at Mobile, Alabama right now, and there is this one in Bragg's Army. The 2 units are related to one another, and this is part of how they came to both be identified as 48th Tennessee. But this unit has only 6 companies. This unit's companies A, B, C, and D had been men of the other 48th Tennessee that had not been captured at Fort Donelson back in February of 1862. But when that other 48th Tennessee was declared paroled and exchanged, its colonel, William Voorhees, had enough political connection to get his regiment reestablished on the books, and to get his former men, who were now part of Nixon's 48th Tennessee, back. And this 48th Tennessee lost companies A, B, C, and D, and this regiment only consists of companies E, F, G, H, I, and K. Only 6 companies. They are only 155 men strong. About half the size of most of the other regiments. And Colonel Nixon writes in his report, about 6 p.m., an order was given to advance upon the enemy, who were in position about 600 yards in our front and upon the top of a ridge. After advancing about 300 yards, the enemy opened with 1 piece of artillery directly in front of my regiment with grape and canister. At the same time, he opened with several guns about 400 yards to my left in front of the 3rd and 5th Confederate, commanded by Colonel Smith. after passing over a line of Confederate troops. The enemy opened fire with small arms, their left resting opposite the right of my regiment. The enemy's left resting opposite the right of my regiment, which means the regiment to his right, the 35th Tennessee, is where? Beyond the end of the Union line, directly in Nixon's front. A well-directed fire from the regiments to my left, as well as as my regiment, broke the enemy's line. They were driven about a mile and a half when the firing ceased. The 35th Tennessee, to Nixon's right, says that we encountered the enemy in strong position, one for which the opposing forces had been contending throughout almost the entire day. I ordered Captain Newby of Company A to throw forward his company as skirmishers, this leaving Captain Mitchell on the right. And the reason he mentions Mitchell particularly is Mitchell's is a newly organized company. This is their first battle. And now, which company is the right of his regiment? It's this brand new organized company. And Captain Alley on the left. Here the left and center of our brigade became engaged, firing from both artillery and small arms, becoming general and heavy. The engagement was fierce, lasting about an hour. My command, being on the right of the brigade, did not fire but a few shots for the first half hour. About this time, General Hill and his staff came riding along and complimented my command for the uniform and steady advance that they were making, their cool and manly conduct. He remarking that at the same time that a battery would soon open upon the enemy from our rear with shell, grape, and canister, that he had ordered it for the moral effect. General Hill had not passed on more than 200 yards to the right when the battery did open, but instead of reaching the enemy, they threw their missiles into my command, which was very annoying. I immediately galloped back and soon had the firing stopped. A cavalry force here also fired upon us through mistake, but fortunately, however, doing us little damage. This error, too, I speedily corrected, and moving on before met and routed the 6th Indiana Regiment, taking some few prisoners, one of them being the orderly to Major Campbell commanding the 6th Indiana, and also 2 horses belonging to the major. The engagement lasted about 1 hour, resulting in the dislodgement of the enemy, who fell back in confusion about 3/4 of a mile. The 35th Tennessee actually overlaps the Union line, and this is going to allow Lucius Polk and Daniel Harvey Hill to actually kind of wheel the right of Polk's brigade towards the left to get more on the flank of the enemy line. Before it gets too dark here, part of the reason why the enemy they overlap the enemy line is that on this general map you can see Baldwin's brigade here at Winfrey Field, and this is what they're really contacting. But there are 2 other Union units back here, but they are not up on the front line as on Baldwin, and this leaves Baldwin's left flank exposed, allowing Polk to be able to get on it. Scribner and Starkweather are going to have relatively limited contact with the Confederates. In fact, in the darkness, There'll even be confusion, and at one point, these two regiments wheel. Scribner wheels to the right, Starkweather wheels to the left, and in the darkness, as they make their respective wheels, suddenly it seems as if what? There are enemy troops directly in their front. And Scribner and Starkweather actually fire several volleys at one another. But there are not very many casualties, because in the darkness, in the forest, the soldiers wind up shooting high, and most of the shots are going to go over their heads. The Union line is not a full, solid line. But we're going to move on now and move towards that Union line that is being struck by Polk and Wood's brigades of Cleburne's divisions. Questions or observations here? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Infantry field now, which we had walked across on our way out at the start of the program. The Union line that these Confederate soldiers are attacking is in the edge of the woods there behind me, and along the field edge right up here, and then extended further into the woods there to the north. The left of Lucius Polk's brigade is coming out into the field just over there, but attacking to Polk's left is the Alabama and Mississippi Brigade of Sterling Alexander Martin Wood, and the right regiment of that brigade is the 15th Mississippi Battalion of Sharpshooters. The officer writes, the report says the battalion's position was on the right of the 32nd and 45th Mississippi regiments. We were ordered to conform to our line to that of Brigadier General Polk's brigade on our right. We did not move far before we met the enemy's line of battle, sheltered behind a fence. They engaged us hotly for some time, but finally gave way before the impetuosity of our troops. They fell back across the field and formed against the edge of the woods on the other side. By this time, night had come on, and the position of the enemy could only be told by the blaze of their guns. The last position was hotly contested by the enemy. To their left is the consolidated 32nd and 45th Mississippi. They are ordered forward, and their colonel writes, I immediately deployed Captain Williams' company of the 45th Mississippi, which was my left company, as skirmishers, and went myself and gave them their position about 300 yards in front of the main line. The sharpshooters would dress on Polk's brigade, and I would dress on them. That if I encountered a battery of the enemy, I must charge and take it. The advance was accordingly made, and I soon passed over our troops lying down. As I approached an open field in my front, my skirmishers soon became engaged with the enemy's skirmishers and I pushed my line of skirmishers forward as rapidly as possible. But their advance was slow, as the ground was hotly contested. My main line gained rapidly on the skirmishers, so that by the time the main line reached the first fence, the fence at the edge of the woods there behind you, they received a volley from the enemy's main line, which was behind the next fence, 200 yards distant, across the field there now behind me. My main line then commenced firing as the skirmishers in their front retired to their rear, and the whole line was soon engaged. I pushed my regiment rapidly forward, but their advance was slow, as they were compelled to pass through the open field against a line of battle of the enemy, strongly posted behind a fence. The advance, however, was steady, and the enemy's line began to give way as we advanced within 40 or 50 yards of the fence. Up to this time, the enemy had fired rapidly, but as it was already getting dark, they overshot us, killing only 5 of my men and wounding about 20, which was a small number considering their great advantage. After they had left the fence, many of them continued to fire from behind trees, but my line continued to advance and fire until they had gained the fence. About this time, Captain Semple came up with his battery, and Lieutenant Colonel Charlton reported to me from the left of the regiment that our left was overlapping the 45th Mississippi. 45th Alabama. And that at the same time, Major Hawkins of the sharpshooters reported to me that the left of Polk's brigade was pressing his battalion, both insisting upon an order to cease firing, that we would do more harm to our friends than our enemy. In the darkness, the ability to keep direction was diminished, and as the 45th the 32nd and 45th Mississippi came out into the field here in the area where we are, they are going to partly overlap the 45th Alabama to their left, the 45th Alabama getting out in front of them, and some of the 32nd and 45th Mississippi men will actually fire into the right rear of the 45th Alabama. The division artillery, under the command of the division chief of artillery, T.R. Hotchkiss, had been directed to follow along behind the center of the brigade. But now it is dark. The enemy is in position at the edge of the woods, firing in this direction, and Semple orders both his own battery under Lieutenant Galway and Calvert's Arkansas battery under Thomas J. Key to move into the action. Let's move over by the guns. Follow in rear of Wood's brigade, it being the center of the division, and we formed line as we advanced through the woods and into the field. Here we encountered a hot fire of musketry and artillery as we advanced across the open field, but covered by the darkness and the ascent. As if you can tell, the ground is rising up just a little bit with the enemy in the edge of the woods there. Many of their shots are going high. Covered by the darkness and the ascent, most of the shot passed over us. We were ordered by Major Hotchkiss to forward into battery as we approached the woods and passed through the 32nd and 45th Mississippi, coming into battery at the edge of the woods in front of the 32nd and 45th Mississippi when we opened fire to the front on the line of the enemy, only a short distance from us, guided entirely by the flash of their guns in the darkness. Polk's brigade advanced so rapidly, his right swinging towards the left as it advanced, that it was difficult to distinguish his line from the enemy, and we were obliged to train our guns further and further to the left after each round. And after about 20 rounds, the enemy were driven from the field, which was held by the division until we moved forward on the following day. Lieutenant Key of the Calvert's battery wrote that when I moved up at a trot and let fly the dogs of war into the Yankee ranks, and into the brief period the enemy fled in confusion. Night closed the bloody scene, and we slumbered on the victorious field. These two batteries, covered by the darkness and the ground rising up to here, was able to close within just a short distance of the Federal line before opening fire. let's get up on the Federal line, and we'll conclude this this action. It is often very difficult to figure out exactly what is going on, because there aren't a lot of really good landmarks for them to observe and note. Even a couple of things I've read to you tonight, there are varying estimates about how far they went before they crossed over the line of friendly troops that was laying on the ground. There are varying estimates about how far they advanced after passing over the line of friendly troops before they struck the enemy. So we have a lot of accounts. The problem is usually trying to reconcile them, to integrate them together. So. Unknown to to Cleburne and his men, about the same time that they are ordered to advance, the Federals that they are going to strike begin to execute an order that had been given to them in late afternoon. George Thomas, the commander of this sector of the Union line, had recognized that during the course of the fighting that day, these Union troops were fighting over a very spread out or attenuated area. And particularly his left flank was not well anchored, and Thomas had noted a low rise of ground in the woods just east of the Kelly Field, and in late afternoon he had ordered that just at dark, that these troops out here on this line pull back to that new position and deploy there. And that had actually begun to happen just at the moment that Cleburne's men moved forward. And that repositioning by these Federals had begun on mostly on their right, and had then been working leftward. And while Cleburne and his men perceive that they are going to drive the enemy up to 1.5 miles, if they had attacked 15 or 20 minutes later, there probably would have been no Federal force here for them to strike as well. In this sector where we stand right now, along this wood edge right here, along the fence line here that had been turned into field fortifications, was the 1st Ohio. And Lieutenant Colonel Bassett Langdon is keeping his men in the fight against the Federals Confederates who are directly in his front, when all of a sudden there is a Confederate force appearing on his right flank. Villick's brigade is falling back, and now Langdon has to do the same with his 1st Ohio and the 5th Kentucky beyond, and the 93rd Ohio as well. And they now begin this rearward movement, and in this, the brigade commander, Philemon Baldwin, is going to be killed. At the time, no one really sees him fall, and his body will be left on the battlefield. Rosecrans had directed that his officers wear less identifying insignia, and Baldwin apparently did that, and his remains were never identified. There is no, where he is buried today is unknown, probably just amongst the unknown at Chattanooga. Just up the trail beyond the corner of the field there, you'll find one of those 15-high 8-inch naval shell pyramids that marks the spot where Philemon Baldwin fell. The command of the brigade will descend to William Berry of the 5th Kentucky, but not for a while, because in this confusion they do not know for a time that Baldwin has fallen, but they are now falling back as well. But they are going to, for a while, conduct kind of a fighting retreat, and Cleburne's men, Polk's brigade here on the right, Wood's brigade here on the left, will continue pushing forward to, as I said, eventually claim that they pushed the enemy as much as 1.5 miles back. We'll make our just the short distance here further and one more stop to conclude our program. Generals withdrawing, the Confederates ending their pursuit. The fighting dies away. Polk's brigade actually will push on a little bit further beyond here before halting and laying down to begin to rest. As the 2nd Tennessee man said, the dead of both sides were numerous and intermingled, and some of the badly wounded still lay where they fell. When success was assured, loud cheers ran along the line as the shouts died away. A long defiant whoop broke the silence in front from an irrepressible Federal, and the noisy tumult was over for the time. Later that night, heavy cheering was heard a mile in front, probably announcing the arrival of reinforcements. With the silence descending on the battlefield, prowlers appeared. Prowlers began searching the field for booty, and as each one came back with acquisitions of money, finger rings, tobacco, haversacks, knapsacks, blankets, and the like, fresh parties started out and prowled all night, some of them going as far as the enemy's line. The United States soldiers, while encamped about Lookout Mountain, had manufactured finger rings of laurel root, which is abundant on the mountain. Numbers of these were collected, and in some instances, the brutal prowlers unjointed the stiffened fingers in order to remove them. In fact, our own dead were robbed without scruple. To the Confederates, the night was more or less feverish from anxious anxiety for the morrow. A constant chopping of and felling of pines in front kept them awake to the probabilities of a desperate contest the next day. There was but one feeling among the men, and that was the necessity of making an attack at daylight before the enemy's works were finished. And with this view, they were in line at the earliest light, ready for action the next morning. As I said, if this attack had started 15 minutes later, there may well have been no Federals here to receive Cleburne's attack at all. And in the darkness, the casualties that Cleburne's men suffered would probably have been better served being saved and committed better the following day, September the 20th. But it's one of the more spectacular events of the Battle of Chickamauga. This night fight with the soldiers firing at the muzzle flashes of the other side. With the silence descending largely on the battlefield after this, the troops of both sides will try to get some rest in anticipation for what is going to come on September the 20th. We're just a few yards short of where your vehicles are. I do appreciate you all coming out and participating in this program this evening, and hope you'll consider attending some of the additional programs the National Military Park is offering tomorrow and this coming week as we recognize the 161st anniversary of the Battle of Chickamauga. And I thank you for your attention this evening. Thank you.